Hello my friends, in today's video we will take a look at SIRUI Aurora 35mm F1.4 for the L mount. 35mm is the second lens in the series after the 85mm Aurora, which was released about a year ago. The 85mm offers pretty much unprecedented price to performance ratio, which means that the bar is set rather high for the 35mm as it promises great optical qualities in a compact and fully featured package. In this video, we will take a look at the optical qualities of this lens with Panasonic S1R II and the autofocus in combination with the S1 II. 35mm is a very versatile and neutral focal length. It offers a good balance between wide-ish field of view and emphasis on the subject. It is useful for anything from landscapes and cities to environmental portraits and even product photography. It is also one of the most popular focal lengths for street and reportage photography. F1.4 is very bright aperture, which lets in a lot of light and provides very shallow depth of field for subject separation even at this relatively wide focal length. Much like with the 85mm version, the low weight is one of the highlights of the 35mm Aurora. It is even lighter at 495 grams. It is 10.1 cm long, so it is also very compact. Despite the low weight, there are no compromises when it comes to the build quality. The whole outer construction is made of metal, including both rings. I can definitely say that it feels premium, including the surface finish. There isn't really anything that I could criticize in terms of the build quality. It is weather sealed and it has a nice rubber gasket around the mount. There is also a USB-C port for firmware update, which works with no issues. Mounted on Panasonic S1 II or S5 II series, it is very well balanced and the combination doesn't feel front heavy at all. There is also enough space between the lens and the grip, so use with gloves won't be an issue. It uses a 62mm filter thread, which is very common diameter. The 85mm Aurora uses 67mm filter thread, so if you have both, you might want to use step-up ring on the 35mm. A lens hood is included in the box. It is a very high quality lens hood with anti-reflective grooves on the inner side. It even has a release button, which is quite uncommon in this price range. Regarding the control elements, it offers everything that you might expect on high-end lenses and more. The focusing ring has a good amount of resistance and it gives you some amount of artificial feel. The focus throw can actually be adjusted in the camera menu on Panasonic, so it will behave exactly as you wish. It has a nice grippy texture and it is very pleasant to use. The aperture ring has very tactile clicks in 1/3 of a stop increments with very nice sound. If you would like to have a smooth aperture ring, there is a declicking mechanism on the right side. If you prefer to use dial on the camera to change the aperture, you can simply set it to a position. A novelty is iris lock, which can lock the aperture ring in a position or out of a position. I mean, why not? It may prevent some accidents. AF/MF switch is also available, which is great because Panasonic S9 doesn't have one. Last but not least, there is a function button which can be set in the camera menu just like with Panasonic first-party lenses. So how about the optical qualities? I have tested this lens with a fairly demanding 45 megapixel full-frame sensor in Panasonic S1R II. The central sharpness is excellent right from f1.4. The contrast is very solid, but there is room for improvement. There is also some amount of chromatic aberration on contrasting edges, but the amount is pretty low for f1.4. There is an increase of contrast at f2, the amount of detail is still excellent, and there is also still some little amount of chromatic aberration. The image quality in the center of the frame at f2.8 is pretty much perfect. There is basically no chromatic aberration, the amount of detail is maximal, and the contrast is great. There isn't really any room for improvement, so the image quality stays the same at f4, f5.6 and f8. There is a tiny bit of diffraction, but this amount is remarkably low for an f1.4 lens. The image quality in the corners is probably even more impressive. The amount of detail in corners at f1.4 is pretty incredible, the contrast is great, and there is almost no chromatic aberration. This is by far the best corner image quality at f1.4 that I have ever seen with this resolution. Much like in the center, the image quality at f2.8 is perfect with maximal amount of detail, no chromatic aberration, and great contrast. There is no room for improvement, so the image quality stays the same until f8, and there is the tiniest amount of diffraction at f11. Well, what can I say? The optical quality of this lens is fantastic. There is some amount of chromatic aberration in the center at f1.4, which is usually the case with very sharp bright aperture lenses. The image quality and the corners is unbelievable at this price point. I suspect that the image circle of this lens is probably larger than what is required for full frame. 35mm Aurora can indeed live up to the high standards set by the 85mm version. There is a tiny bit of pincushion distortion which can be corrected by a lens profile available on SIRUI's website. The vignetting correction needs to be turned way down though. There is also a little bit of vignetting, but the amount is very low even at f1.4, which also indicates that the image circle is greater than needed. 35mm Aurora also has quite a bit of character, which is not based on optical perfection, but more on things such as excellent contrast and the rendition of autofocus background. The colors that you will get in combination with the S1R II are also very nice, and this combination simply makes very nice pictures. Speaking of the background blur, this lens doesn't have 7, 9 or even 11 aperture blades. It has 13 aperture blades and the bokeh looks accordingly. At f1.4 you can get very significant subject separation even at 35mm, but the highlight are actually transitions between areas in focus and out of focus, which are extremely smooth. It also handles busy backgrounds really well. The subject separation and the bokeh is obviously a major strength of the 35mm Aurora and one of the main reasons to buy it. The minimal focus distance is 35 cm, which translates to 0.14 times magnification, which is pretty typical for this type of lens. The image quality at minimum focus distance is solid, there is some chromatic aberration at low apertures, but the overall image quality from f2.8 is great. The autofocus generally works really well with Panasonic cameras. The responsiveness and the accuracy are excellent. All of the smart features also work just like with Panasonic lenses. The drive speed may be a little bit slower than with Panasonic's f1.8 primes because there is more glass to move, but I can still say that the autofocus is very fast. The autofocus in video is basically the same as with Panasonic lenses. The speed is not an issue at all, the responsiveness depends on the camera settings, and the smoothness is excellent. I have nothing to complain about here. It is possible to hear the autofocus motor, but only if you are in very quiet room and very close to the lens. If you are using a shotgun mic, it shouldn't be picked up. Basically the only downside of this lens that I have found is the focus breathing. The amount is not as bad as with Sony GM lenses for example, but it is definitely noticeable and visible, so be aware of that if you intend to do a lot of focus pulling in video. As expected, 35mm Aurora is not stabilized, but Panasonic's in-body image stabilization works great at this focal length. When you combine f1.4 aperture and in-body image stabilization rated for 8 stops in S1R II or S1R II, it is an excellent combination for the low-light use. In video, Panasonic's IBIS is excellent, very effective and predictable at the same time, so there are a lot of situations where it may indeed replace a gimbal. To sum up, SIRUI Aurora 85mm f1.8 is an excellent lens. The success of the 85mm version makes it less shocking, but still providing this kind of optical qualities and feature set would be a success at any price. Doing so at this price is pretty incredible. The sharpness is excellent across the frame right from f1.4, there is just a little bit of chromatic aberration which disappears around f2. Especially the corner sharpness is fantastic and it is one of the best lenses that I've ever tested in terms of the image quality regardless of the price. The rendition of the out of focus background is excellent as well thanks to 13 aperture blades. The build quality is great as well and the controls are more than complete. It takes beautiful pictures with a nice modern lens character in combination with Panasonic cameras. There is not much more to say about that. The only downside that I can think of is the focus breathing. Overall, 35mm Aurora is another big success for SIRUI, and I hope to see 24, 50 and perhaps 16mm version as soon as possible. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.